Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be reflecting on my first year as an assistant psychologist, and this video is going to be a very casual one. And just to put this out there, I started this job, it was my first job out of uni, it was my first proper job. I started as a fetus and now I feel like I've developed into this, not psychologist, not quite yet, but I feel like I'm now a toddler who is asking probably way too many questions and just overly curious about everything, which I love. And I love this phase of where I'm at as a psychologist because I kind of know what I'm doing, but then I kind of don't. And so I'm in this great in-between where I feel confident in some things, but in other things I'm like, oh, I need to learn more, I just need to do so much more learning. And I find that so inspiring. So the first thing that I learned in this role is that I now understand what it means to experience a stroke and what that means for someone's mental health and their cognition. Prior to this role, my knowledge of stroke was very limited. My auntie had a stroke quite a few years back, and thank God she was not severely impacted by the effect of the stroke, so she was doing everything the same. She could walk, she could talk, she didn't have any problems with her thinking or her memory, everything was good. But that is very different for the kinds of people that we see in our service, and so for me that was pretty hard to realise that in a split second someone could lose the ability to talk, someone could lose the ability to read, someone could lose their vision, someone could lose the ability to walk, and that could be them for the rest of their life. And I didn't realise, well, I knew on paper that that is what could happen, but I didn't realise like what that looks like for a person and what that means for their mental health. And it's really difficult because you then realise that sometimes the role of a psychologist isn't really to fix things, because you can't fix the fact that they're not walking anymore, you can't fix the fact that they can't see. You're there to help them adjust to this, and I think that is a really difficult job. I've gained a better understanding of how, just thinking about the hierarchy of needs, just how much that does influence our mental health, and you really do see that when you are working in a health setting. And also with that, I have learned more about MDT working and how important that is and how tricky that can be. And because of COVID, everything has been moved online. Most of our MDT sessions are online, and especially as psychologists, because we don't need to have direct face-to-face in-person contact with an individual unless there is very high risk or unless we need to do a mental capacity assessment, we tend to be sat in our ivory towers looking down at the chaos beneath. That is what people think anyway. And so working in MDT, where a lot of your colleagues are nurses, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, and those people are on the ward and have to go into work, but we're sat in our cushy little office not having to wear the full PPE all of the time and not having to put ourselves at risk. That leaves some underlying tension, and we have done as much as we can to kind of help the team feel supported, but we don't know what it's like to be on the front line in that way. So that has been quite different, but overall it's given me a really good perspective of the importance of MDT. Like, no matter what, this MDT is taking place, because within MDT you're giving the best possible care to an individual, and it's incredible, especially when someone has experienced a stroke. They do need care from all of the different disciplines in order to achieve the best rehabilitation. But also within this learning of MDT, I've learned about the politics of the NHS and how things work, and that can be quite difficult, is like managing, like knowing who's who, knowing where you stand and what and your place. And at the beginning I had no idea, and you have to be so careful with what you say to people, how you write letters. Gosh, this video is going to be really long, guys, I'm sorry, but to be fair, this space more than anything is also a space for me to reflect and also to hopefully look back on in years to come when I have more experience and I can see like, wow, I was a little toddler and now I'm a teenager. I can't wait. Another thing that I've learned is about dementia and how it presents in younger clients. In this role now, we see a plethora of people, including younger clients, and that's where I've really seen the most development in myself. My ability to recognise how dementia presents within a younger client. I'm really developing my understanding of dementia, and dementia is something that I'm very passionate about, and I've always thought I would go into working with older adults because of that and my passion for helping people with dementia and their families. Being able to deepen my knowledge in this way and really gain confidence in my neuropsychological assessment skills has all been really great. So yeah, I've kind of mentioned this. I've become really confident in doing neuropsych assessments, and that's not to say that I know how to do every single neuropsych assessment that there is in the book, but I do know the basic understanding of what makes a good neuropsychological assessor. I'm just becoming more confident in doing the assessments and interacting with those people who normally during the time of the assessment they're feeling quite nervous because it's a dementia assessment. I've really learned how to manage these nerves of the client, and also I've understood the importance of being confident and showing that I'm confident in my own abilities for the client, because they do not want to be in assessment with someone who's like flustered, is worried that they're going to pull out the wrong bit of stimulus. Like, they don't want that. So I've learned also that if you're not feeling confident, just fake it and put on that kind of persona of that you have got everything under control, when in reality you probably don't. We have been doing things remotely, so people have been doing their assessments at home and will be like on the phone or we'll be doing video calls. Like, that is difficult, and so just understanding the environment that a neuropsych test has to take place in, but also the things that can impact neuropsych assessments when working remotely. Also things like there's that power dynamic where you're now going into their home, whereas typically they'd be coming into the clinic, and so this can impact the assessment in the way that people feel more comfortable at home. And I've had some things happen in remote assessments that just wouldn't happen if people were in clinic. So I'm learning how to manage those distractions remotely and learning how to be more boundaried in my approach. So if there is something that can't be happening, then I have learned how to now put my foot down and say, no, you can't do that, or no, this person can't help you, which I found really difficult at the beginning, but I'm trusting in my abilities as an assistant psychologist, in that I know what I'm doing and I can tell people how to act during a neuropsych assessment, and whether that means they need to get away from all of the distractions or tell their family member to leave them alone for a moment, that's what's going to happen. This is a big one, and that is managing risk. In my role, there's been a handful of cases where I've had to manage risk, and not alone. My supervisors have been very close by. If I'm the one having the phone call with the individual, like, there's got to be a period of time where I'm dealing with it independently, you know, because my supervisor isn't on the phone with me all the time when I'm talking to all of my clients. There has been a handful of scenarios where I've had to manage some risk, mainly people maybe expressing suicidal ideation. In my role, at first, I've always gone by like, better to be safe than sorry, right? And so I always tell my supervisors, and I always will as an assistant psychologist, tell my supervisors if there are any individuals who are expressing these thoughts. But I have learnt that there is a big difference between active suicidal ideation and passive suicidal ideation. Within managing risk, I like to know that I have done everything that I need to do. I need to know that I have crossed the T's, dot the I's, done all of the paperwork that I need to do, sent all of the letters to the GPs, to whoever that needs to be notified about this person. But then in that, I've had some really good conversations with my supervisors who have helped me to differentiate between active and passive suicidal ideation. We can never be 100% certain, but this is something that I'm learning, and it has helped me in a way to kind of distance myself from the scenario so that I don't get too worked up, because honestly guys, it gets exhausting. Overall, throughout this year, I have become more confident in carrying out neuropsychological assessments, definitely, and also carrying out interventions. And so most of the interventions that I do are CBT based, but I've also done some narrative therapy work, and I've really enjoyed it. I've never been given this responsibility before of doing interventions, and it's where the real learning happens, guys. At first I was absolutely terrified that I would do something wrong, but then I've had to trust in my own like trait as being a very caring person, that as long as that's your baseline for everything, that you are doing everything with care and you're doing it for the benefit of the client and not for yourself and not for anyone else, then the chances are you're not going to do anything horrendous. In this whole year, I've really gained trust in my own abilities, and I can manage sessions with clients and they can be helpful. And while I by no means have ticked all the boxes in providing perfect CBT, I trust in myself to plan my sessions in a way where I know what I'm doing. I know how to have conversations where the person feels held. I know when to ask for help. I really utilise my supervision. And I just need to learn how to trust myself a little bit more. Like, I genuinely care for these clients, and so when there's that level of care underlying everything I'm doing, I know that I can't mess up in the way that I overthink in my mind. And like, to think at the beginning of this year I had never done any kind of intervention at all, and that's part of my everyday life at work, which is incredible. And I'm so grateful to have had these amazing formative learning experiences in this job. In this job, I've also learned that the role of a psychologist isn't just the clinical work, it's not just the admin work, it's also the leadership role that you have, which I didn't realise. So I like to think that I would be a good leader, and in the opportunities that I have had to be a leader, I've stepped up to the plate and I've managed the situation okay. So I like to think that I do have those skills, but I didn't realise how much of a leader you have to be when you are a psychologist. And I have had some opportunities at work to lead, and probably the one that sticks out to me the most and the situation that really developed my skills as a leader was when I had to provide training for a cognitive screening test for dementia to other colleagues in our team. This training was delivered to junior doctors, nurses, social workers, other therapists, loads of different people. And my job was to teach them how to do this cognitive assessment, which I think is quite crazy, and I'm really proud of myself that I did that. And it really, again, taught me about the need to be confident. And honestly, I didn't really think about this word of confidence before I sat down to film this video, but it is cropping up a lot, and I think that is quite telling of what I need to develop and what I perceive as important as a future clinical psychologist. And being given opportunities, whether it be small ones or big ones, I'm learning about the kind of leader that I want to be as a future clinical psychologist, which I feel like is really important. I'm also learning from observing others the parts of their leadership skills that I like and the leadership skills that I'm not too fond of, which is amazing to think that like this whole part of being a clinical psychologist I just completely overlooked and didn't know about until starting this role. Another thing that I've learnt is how to have difficult conversations with clients and their families sometimes, and especially in the time of COVID where we are really having to call upon family members to support, especially when people are socially isolated. Those can be quite difficult conversations when you're calling people out in that way. Most of them have gone as well as they could, but it's just like the bit beforehand, like the bit where you're dialing the number and you're like, oh crap, like can I do this? And you've got like these mental bullet points in your head of like what you want to say and just like get in and out of that conversation. It's actually been okay, and as long as you're doing everything to honour that duty of care that you have, then you should be okay. The last thing that I want to talk about is my ability to formulate, and this is something that I'm really working on. I still really bloody struggle with a lot of the time, and it's only something that I've really been diving into over the recent months, which isn't something that I'm particularly happy about. I wish that I had really focused in on my formulation skills early on, and I think part of me at the beginning of this role was really relying upon my supervisors to kind of like tell me what to do and direct me and do that part of my own personal development, which is not their job. And that's another thing that I've learned, is that it really is down to you. And I think I came into this role with that like student mindset still, and I think that's the case for most people in their first graduate job. I've moved out of that phase now and I'm happy about it. I've really started to develop my formulation skills. I'm reading more books on it. I'm currently reading the John Stone book about formulation, which everyone and their pet dog has. It is a really good book. I'm really enjoying it. It's even got me to think about psychodynamic formulation, which I never thought I would be interested in ever. And I'm also just becoming confident in sharing my formulations, because I think it is quite like nerve-wracking. This is what you've kind of pieced together with the client and then you have to present it, so it's kind of like, how do I do this? And I'm just learning how to really work within a clinical environment. And so like presenting formulations, I've really learned that with formulation that it is about working with the individual to piece together parts of their life and their experiences to just see the picture around what they're facing at the moment. It does underpin everything that we do as psychologists, because if we don't have formulation, then like really what are we working off of and what are we working towards? And that's something that I really realised, and that's why I'm diving so deep into formulation at the moment. It's a skill that I really need to develop, which leads me nicely on my smoothest transition ever into what I need to develop. And like I have learnt way more in my time as an assistant psychologist, but those are like the main things. If I move on to the things that I need to develop, and again this list is not exhaustive, I've written down here all of the above, which is true. I do need to carry on working with all of those things. Just because I've learnt them doesn't mean I'm like done and dusted. It's a continuous development process for all psychologists at all levels, which I love. Some of the things I really do need to develop is group working. Because of COVID, I have not led any groups. I've not been part of any groups. I was part of a group as in like therapeutic groups or support groups, so I would really like to be involved with some group work if we can. And this is more of like a personal development thing that seeps into work, is being able to set boundaries. And by that I mean learning when to say no, learning when to maybe be a bit more strict, and also about people asking personal questions, which is something that I didn't know how to deal with. And I am getting better at this, I guess, in knowing how to respond, knowing what questions I can, should, want to answer. But that overall I can say no, and I need to put my foot down sometimes, and that is quite hard to deal with, especially when you're working with older clients. And I was reflecting on this in supervision, and it's like my cultural background of respecting your elders is really heavily ingrained in me. And I know you can respect elders but also kind of set boundaries, but to me, and how I grew up, that's just like a big no. Yeah, even that is like something to get my head around as well, but mainly setting some boundaries. I've mentioned this, but also like developing my formulation skills. Overall though, like looking back, I have just become more confident in working as an assistant psychologist, being more confident in like making all of the phone calls, writing all of the letters. Another thing that I've learned is how to write really good letters. At the beginning I would send my letters to my supervisor to like read through and approve and correct, and it would come back all in red pretty much. And now I send my letters off and sometimes they come back with like 1 or 2 red sentences, which is incredible. And these letters that I'm talking about are summary letters, letters to GPs, discharge letters to clients, but mainly the like summary letters are the ones that we use the most and are kind of like the trickiest ones to write. And it's just like amazing to be able to quantify my development in that way, of like seeing how much red there was before and how little red there is now. Like I'm really proud of myself in my letter writing skills, which I never thought I'd say before, but you have to be so careful with what you write in letters and how you word things, and I'm really learning this skill. So yeah, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, guys, well done, and thank you for sticking with me through this chaotic reflective journey. Thank you so much for watching. If you've liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content like this, and until next time guys, I'll see you later. Bye.